if ZANU-PF was sincere in protecting local industry, this instrument 64 would have been introduced long back, maybe 1980. Rather than to wait until they've destroyed the very economy. Because at the moment, if you look at it, you've also alluded to the fact that they are banning some fabrics. We used to have a very vibrant cotton industry, spinning and ginnery industry. David Whitehead was the biggest in SADC, if you not sub-Saharan Africa. And at the moment is no more. If you go to the ginneries at the moment, it's just a ghost buildings, ghost workshops. So what are they trying to protect? If you look at the cheap commodities that the government is talking about, these are coming directly from China, from looking east. So they are not coming from within our neighboring countries, South Africa, Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique. Those products, they are still relatively expensive compared with the products coming from China.
That's true. I think that's a good point.
And not only that, if you look at most of the companies operating at the moment in Zimbabwe, they are being run by cabinet ministers, by ZANU-PF leadership, including Mugabe himself. So these people are trying to protect their own pockets, their own companies. And these are the same people who do the imports from China. And who also do imports from the Western world. In terms of the control of tariffs for goods coming in the country, that is not new for any government. Any government will have to make a balance between the imports and exports. And currently, Zimbabwe exports to the tune of 5.5 billion, yet only exports 3 billion. So if you look at that, there's a deficit of about 2.5 billion. It is not sustainable for any economy. But then if you look at it, why are we a net importer rather than a net exporter? And when did this start? Because in 1980s, Zimbabwe was actually self-sufficient. This is why even Julius Nyerere said at one point, Robert Mugabe, you have inherited the jewel of Africa. Don't spoil it, don't destroy it.
And I just thought of something here. I don't know if it's going to make sense, but since we're under sanctions, would it not make sense that we actually have we actually need imports to come in? Because if we reduce the imports, yet we're under sanctions, it means are we not increasing our own sanctions?
Actually, your question is an indication that we are not under sanctions. If we can import, we are not under sanctions.
If we can actually ban things coming in.
Yes, because if you are under sanctions, then you find you've got restrictions. You can't actually import goods from various countries. In this case, Mugabe is always trying to give an excuse that Zimbabwe is under sanction from the Western world. Yet, if you look at it, there's a lot of trade inflow from EU to Zimbabwe, and also the imports. Zimbabwe can import any products, any goods from EU, as well. They are actually also importing from the USA. But I think we have to make it to make a comparison between the era that we are in under ZANU-PF and the era that Zimbabwe was under the Smith regime, because there are some economic similarities. In the 1970s up to 1979, Rhodesia was under sanctions. And these sanctions were very much binding. So Rhodesia could only trade with the apartheid South Africa. And here is why I have to draw those parallels, is because this instrument 64 was first introduced by the Smith regime in 1974.
Yes, because it does say here as well.
Yes, and to protect their industry. Of course, we know when we inherited Zimbabwe in 1980, with a very functioning economy, and for your information, the GDP, which is the aggregate of products and services produced within a country, the highest GDP rate ever recorded in Zimbabwe is not after independence. It was actually in 1972.
Okay.
When the country was under sanctions. Severe, pronounced sanctions.
And they are different from what we have now, if you look at it. Because one of the arguments I've always had with a lot of people is people just use the word sanction very carelessly without looking at exactly what that particular sanction is actually saying. And if you look at the sanctions of 1972 against Smith and the restrictive travel restrictions on a few people imposed on the ZANU-PF leadership, there is clearly a big difference. But we use it carelessly as if sanctions is the same throughout, but it's not, because in some cases there can be sanctions on medical products, there can be sanctions on weapons. But Zimbabwe is still bringing in weapons. And if they can bring in weapons, I don't know what sanctions we're talking about.
And sometimes sanctions can force you to innovate.
Yes.
And it's the same sanctions that made Rhodesia what it was, to be self-sufficient in every respect. Because that one was economic sanctions, not the travel ban that we have with the ZANU-PF at the moment. So yes, the fact that Robert Mugabe, who is supposed to be well informed about the current status of the economy, would actually come out in the open to address and say we are trying to protect our local industry. We have no local industry to talk about in a country where over 90% people are unemployed. And it basically because of the policies, the government policies themselves that destroyed the economy. The indigenization policy that Kasukuwere introduced. Through, again, all these policies, they are discussed at the back end of the Politburo and then smuggled into Parliament, and at the end they become national laws.
Is the Politburo part of the state?
Sorry?
Is the Politburo part of the state? Why does it have so much influence?
Yeah, the problem that we have is there is totally no distinction in the eyes of Robert Mugabe and ZANU-PF. There is totally no distinction and no separation of powers between a political party that is ruling and the government. And this is the source of our problems. And this is why we find every institution that makes investment decision is partisan and is analyzed. And their decisions, they are based on partisan basis without actually putting into consideration the national interest.
Yeah.
This is where we have a problem. And for your information, in terms of, I've alluded that the highest GDP output ever recorded in the history of Zimbabwe was actually during the Smith regime, which was in 1972. And last year we recorded 1.5. Okay, so 22% was 1972. We actually recorded remarkable GDP growth during the government of national unity. So we, like for example, in 2010 we reached 8.1. It remained the highest so far. And it shows that with a government that is accountable, yes, the economy can be turned around. And this is why during the government of national unity, even the GDP, the growth, the investment started, there was actually an inflow of foreign direct investment. For example, at the moment, the average foreign direct investment in Zimbabwe is about 350 million.
And how does that compare with the regional partners, with our neighbors?
Compare that with Zambia, 2 billion.
Aye.
Compare that with South Africa, 8-10 billion per year.
Yeah.
Even Malawi, about 1.5 billion. But that the figure that about the 350 million that I've been talking about Zimbabwe was up to 2014.
Okay.
2015.
We don't know.
Is a different ball. I only know half the half report of the year, the first 6 months, and that was 67 million.
Okay.
Now, if you look at that, the foreign direct investment in Zimbabwe is far less than the diaspora remittance.
It means the diaspora Zimbabweans have more faith in sending their relatives money.
Indeed, and it has been averaging about 2 billion.
Okay.
So the economy of Zimbabwe is running at the mercy of the diaspora remittance. Yet the government is suspicious about everybody who is outside the country.
Which is more than, at some point, I think it was more than half the state, the national budget.
Yes, indeed. But also, again, if you look at, I know they've also banned fertilizers, agro inputs, to protect local manufacturers, as they are saying. Now, if you look at it, since 1980, we didn't ban the agricultural imports in terms of the inputs, fertilizers, seeds, etc. People were free to import. Yes, of course, there will be some duty, like any other product.
Yeah.
But this is the period that we actually recorded the highest agricultural imports. And now we've got the land. You'll be surprised to note that during 2010, we recorded 33% of agricultural growth. And that was during the government of national unity. What do you think we recorded last year, 2015?
No clue.
Minus 8%.
Minus 8.
Yes. So you can see, and it has been going down. So the economy works based on trust.
Yeah.
No investor has trust with the ZANU-PF government implementing any coherent policies.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been, the problem with policies of ZANU-PF, they've been so much inconsistent. I think you remember that recently Joao was talking about furthering the indigenization bill. Shinamasa was saying we put it on the shelf.
Yeah.
Right? And you can see the discord coming from various ministries of the same government.
I want to go back to the statutory instrument.
Yeah.
Now, I know that a country can play around with the duty of products that are coming in as a way of discouraging their import.
Yes.
Is that not a better way of doing things than asking people to, removing, because these goods have been removed from the open general license.
Yeah.
Which means you need a special license to import them. And I don't know how much this license is and how easy it is to get. But for normal people to go and apply for a license for these things, when probably they are not going to buy all of these things if they go into South Africa. Maybe they just want a Cremora.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they just want a few items from those 42 items.
Yeah.
Now, does it make sense that they should pay for a license, which is, I don't know how much it is, and I don't know how easy it is to get. And also, if you look at some reports I've been hearing, is that shops like Choppies are still stocking those items. I don't know whether it's from their previous stock or they've got the license and it's easy for them. And also, can we tie that up with the fact that the vendors have been holding demonstrations at the border to the extent that one of the warehouses was burnt? And also, why or how this law is actually affecting the vendors who are unemployed, because we've got more than 90% unemployment. So a lot of people are engaging now in buying from South Africa and selling on the streets of Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Yeah. Firstly, let me respond to Choppies. You find that it's not only Choppies. Okay, Choppies is owned by the Vice President, Mboko. And there are many of these companies that are purportedly being protected by the government, are owned by government ministers. And they will still continue. Don't think that they will be affected with this ban. This ban will affect people like you and me and the vendors we've been talking about. I don't see the government banning big organizations from importing any goods at all. And I think you probably will remember that 3 months ago, 4 import license books disappeared from the government, from the Minister of Industry. Okay? And there were a bit of investigations, but no findings were made public.
Yeah.
The first thing that we heard was that 4 books have been missing. Import license books, not a license certificate.
Which means someone is selling is selling them on the black market.
This is a corrupt government, and this is exactly what we've always been saying. That the economy will not turn around for as long as we've got this corrupt government in place. And what's there? And it is justified for the vendors to protest.
Yeah.
Because if you look at this, they do not have the political muscle that the VP Mpoko, for example, have in terms of still continuing to bring goods in the country. They have no jobs, over 90% unemployment, so that is their only source of an income.
Yeah.
And it is very insensitive for government to move in and ban those goods. Because at the end of the day, it is the citizens themselves who are suffering. If you look at it, even if they are trying to protect the conglomerates, which is the big organizations, you don't protect the big organizations at the expense of your own people. There have to be a balance in terms of the economics.
Yeah.
It actually takes back to us to say, wouldn't it be better for the government to control the amount of goods coming in the country through jute import license? They can introduce import license or tariffs. Yes, I mean, that should have been the way to go. If truly the government believes that we have got local companies that have the capacity to produce.
Was it not also better to ensure that those companies are up and running before introducing a draconian ban like this one?
Indeed, I mean, if you look at it, most of we have actually talked about David Whitehead, which is now a white elephant. Mashaba mines, they are now white elephants as well. Tano, producing under capacity. Bindura nickel mine, 25% capacity. And so forth. Most of the industries in Zimbabwe, they are operating below capacity. Why? Because of capitalization. They do not have access to cheap finance to replace machinery, to maintain the machinery, let alone to pay workers. So the problem is not about the availability of goods. The problem is finance. Capitalization. This is where the problem is. And I'm surprised that the government itself can't read between the lines. Because if you look at their own expenditure for 2015, 33.8 million of expenditure went to president's travel. Capital expenditure for primary education, 0.
Yeah.
Capital expenditure for secondary education, 0. And then you look at capital expenditure for universities, a paid 17,000. So we have got priority wrong.
Health service 6 million. State residency 6.6 million.
There you are.
Presidential hospitality 768,000.
There you are.
I don't know whether VP Mpoko's hotel stay comes in there.
Yeah, it comes in there.
Capital items for primary schools, 0. You've mentioned that one.
Yeah. Maintaining
the president's cars,
yes.
387,000.
There you are. Right. So if you look at we do not have a budget to service infrastructure. This is why if you look at the state of our roads, the state of our railways, the railways are supposed to be moving goods cheaply between cities and between consumers and supply chains, right? That is where the problem is. Why is it the products in Zimbabwe are more expensive than the products in South Africa? Okay?
Is it because the US dollar is the value of the US dollar, which makes production expensive, because we also get inputs from outside the country?
Yeah, but it's a multifaceted thing, isn't it? It's within an economy. It's not one factor that is affecting it. I've actually also alluded to the fact that the movement of goods itself has to be cheaper, right? Even if the production, the goods are produced cheaply, and if the transportation of the goods between the source of production to the consumer is an expensive exercise in terms of the chain of supply, then again that add up to the final bill of the final cost of the product.
Okay. Are you aware that they are also planning to ban trucks so that they use rail transport for goods?
Yes, I heard that, but I haven't read any official document to that effect.
Okay.
I'll be very surprised that if that is an official position of the government. But given this government, anything can happen. Nothing will surprise you with the ZANU-PF government.
Right. So going back to stationary instrument, if Zimbabwe produces enough products and floods Zimbabwe with Zimbabwean products, and they become cheaper than South African products, that would automatically stop people from going into South Africa, isn't it? To go and buy goods from there.
Oh, yes.
There will be no need for a statutory instrument.
Supply and demand.
Selective, yes.
Yeah, supply and demand. I mean, it doesn't matter. Yes, we are using US dollar, okay, and we are the only country using US dollar in Africa, right? Which means that our production, unless it's heavily mechanized, okay, they should be balanced. The fact that you are using US dollar does not necessarily mean that you are at a disadvantage, because you can take that as an advantage.
Yeah.
Because you've got the money to introduce technology in your manufacturing.
I'm happy you mentioned that mechanization, because if you look at the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution, it mechanized the production of foods and the manufacture of goods.
Yes.
So if you look at Zimbabwe now, having taken the land and parceled it out, okay, to some people obviously belonging to ZANU-PF.
Yeah.
Is it not the case that instead of parceling it out, we could have mechanized it?
Indeed.
To ensure and to guarantee that there is enough food production to meet local demand and ensure food security. Because if we parcel it out to people who are struggling, who have no title deeds for those farms, and so they cannot get loans from the bank, because banks cannot give them loans because they've got 99-year leases.
Oh yeah.
So it did not make sense to have mechanized the whole thing.
Oh, indeed.
Ensure there is adequate food production first.
This is what I'm living here in UK, right? Why is it that bread in UK, right, is cheaper than bread in Zimbabwe? Yet in UK they use a pound, which has got a higher value compared with the US dollar.
Yeah.
But it's because of mass production, mechanization, in technology. Because if there is a mass production, then you distribute the costs. Then the value of the product comes down.
Yeah.
And if you open the market as well, and I'm very surprised with the way ZANU-PF government is going. I suppose I know they are going nowhere, so I must stop being surprised. The way economies are run, even if we compare with the Western world, like UK and America, for example, which are the giants in terms of the economy, they strike a balance between free market and an intervention market.
Yeah.
So free market, which is an advocate of freedmen, and then the government intervention, which is a policy by Keynes, sometimes known as the Keynesian economic theory. Now, the Keynes would advocate to say, if the economy is not growing, then inject money so people can spend.
Yeah.
And then Friedman would then argue to say, no, just have a hands free of the economy. Supply and demand would actually stabilize the economy, and the price will be determined by supply and demand.
But you need a balance of the two depending on the status of the economy.
Indeed. I mean, if you look at, for example, here in UK, at one point the government would intervene in terms of interest rates. So they reduce interest rates so that money becomes cheap, so you can easily borrow from the bank at a cheaper rate. And if you can access money easily and cheaply, it means you've got disposable income. And then money will start circulating in the economy. So that's how they do it.
But in Zimbabwe, we're trying to revive an industry when people are not even getting paid.
Indeed, that's where the problem is.
So because they can't even get money because some of these people are civil servants who got farms.
Oh yeah.
And they cannot access any money from the banks.
And you find these countries like Zimbabwe is the only country where all cabinet ministers are actually CEOs of their own companies, full-time, not part-time, but full-time. And you ask yourself, and these are the very people that actually draft bills and policies that drives the economy.
Are you saying there's a conflict of interest?
Of course, not only a conflict of interest, but where do they get the time to dedicate to running the affairs of the company, of the government?
Yeah, panenya.
So it's the issues that we have go deeper than just an instrument 64. Go deeper than just demonstrating.
So the
we
government
need to drill through to say, okay, fine, how did we get here, and how can we dig ourselves out of this hole?
So the government of CEO ministers is legislating
to protect themselves.
The import of goods to protect themselves.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So we should have a scenario whereby we've got a free market, okay? What Zimbabwe needs is the ease of doing business by its own people, local investors, regional investors, and international investors. For your information, there is what we call the perception index. So it's the perception of index of ease of doing business with a country. And Zimbabwe is number 157 out of 177. Okay. So the higher the number, the more difficult you can do business with that country. Now that 157 out of 177 is the highest in SADC, if not sub-Saharan Africa.
So that explains why it's difficult for FDI to flow in.
Oh, yes.
Because if it's so difficult to make money, because what does an investor want when they invest?
Yes.
They want a return on their investment. If they cannot be guaranteed that return, then obviously they are not going to invest. And at the same time, we are competing with our neighbors.
Oh, yes.
So if an investor can see that it's better to do business in Botswana,
yes,
or manufacture in South Africa and export into Zimbabwe, they would rather do that than go and manufacture in Zimbabwe. Because I know some Zimbabweans who actually want to do that. They want to set up because it's so much easier. I understand that in South Africa, I think it's $15 just to open a company, to register a company. In Zimbabwe, it's 10 times that, so it's about $150.
Apart from the corruption chain that you have to go through.
Yes, apart from that, because you have to add an extra 50 or 100%.
Yeah.
So it is easier for even a Zimbabwean to open a company in South Africa, manufacture and then export into Zimbabwe.
Indeed. And look at it. it's not difficult to fix the economy of Zimbabwe. What you need to do is to do just a short survey or research, secondary research. You probably don't need to do much of primary research, just a secondary research, because the information is there in the public domain. From World Bank, IMF, and other agencies, financial agencies, they've got all that data. All you need is access to say, Zimbabwe need, as a government, to say, okay, why is it, foreign investors are not coming to Zimbabwe? The information is there. Even on every country's website, they've got advices, right? You can actually go to UK FCO website, and it will tell you what their perception about investing in Zimbabwe. You can go to, if you are targeting America, then you can go to the website for American investment and see what are their perceptions about us.
Yeah, because you saying that, I think what I've noticed, the trend with a lot of us is we only take information which is coming from newspapers.
Oh yes.
Or online publications. But if you look at it, those online publications are getting their information from, say, the IMF website. So why not go to the source? Because what the newspapers will be doing is to find a headline which is going to hook you up so that you can click on their website.
Indeed.
But in actual fact, the source of the information is there.
Yes.
If you search the original website, the IMF, World Bank, you'll find the information there. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office, you'll find the information there.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is why this talk show that you and me are doing now is very important to the Zimbabweans out there. Not necessarily Zimbabweans alone, but at a global note. And I think from an African perspective, we seem to have similar problems.
Yeah.
So the approach in Africa is more or less the same. Yes, we know that other African countries have moved on, and their economies, like Angola, for example, and Mozambique. But if you look at that, it's because they've changed the policies to make their countries favorable as a destination for investors, both local, regional, and international.
Yes.
Whereas in Zimbabwe, it's always people like Kasukwere who would like to protect their own companies, or who would like to protect the choppies,
and the hotel.
Or Betimpofu trying to protect his wealth in Maryland, etc., etc. This is where the problem is.
Yeah,
if they are politicians and their role is a civil servants to deliver the services to the people of Zimbabwe, then they must do away with this. Much of the time they are trying to protect their own business, and much of the time they are not even articulating policies of the country.
How does a minister of local government with so much land in Harare be a minister who is supposed to look after the land requirements of the local residents?
Well, that's looting, isn't it?
How is it going to? It is land. He's not going to give it away.
But at the end of the day, you look at it, Mugabe knows it. He appointed that person. He appointed Chombo. He knows that those people are amassing wealth corruptly, and he has not done anything. I mean, 4 months ago, he acknowledged that 15 billion has gone missing from the coffers. 4 months thereafter, there's no commission of inquiry set up. No police report, no follow-up. So 15 billion just disappeared in a hole.
But when Chinamasa came here on the 4th, 5th of July, he alluded to the fact that he was on BBC Hard Talk, and he said that 15 billion was mispricing, which means the money they got for those diamonds was much less than they were expecting to get. Vakabirwa vana. Well, the money did not even reach Zimbabwe. That money, I know Tombosvik. Vakanyepera vanhu kuti tichanowana 20 billion vakapiwa hamene vakapiwa.
The fact of the matter is that 15 billion
is missing,
acknowledged by the government, went missing. And we know the figure is much higher. You know, if you can accept liability, a figure.
It means it's much more than that.
It's much more than that. And you say, yes, I'm a little thief. I only stole 15 billion. Please forgive me. It means that person is stolen much more than that.
Yeah,
yes. So the economy of Zimbabwe is not a simple matter as we see it on the surface. But how to deal with it would start by removing the current government, which has been at the helm of power for the past 36 years. Looting, mismanaging the economy. And this is not the government that will instill confidence in the investors to come back in Zimbabwe to invest. Never.
In terms of trust, I think they are damaged goods. And it will take, I don't know, it will not take anything. It will be it's impossible for them to regain that trust after 36 years.
Oh, indeed. I mean, there's nothing that they can come up with worth the trust, either by locals. This is why Zimbabweans don't trust them anymore. They want them to go.
Which is why they don't want them.
Regionally, they don't trust them. Internationally, that's even worse. The further you go from Zimbabwe, that's even worse. So their only solution is to find an exit strategy and save their face, save Zimbabwe.
Right. Have you heard anything about the mega deal signed with China? I know that the president went there, the finance minister went to China, they came back, they said they signed some mega deals. They could not get any money, and this is why they are pursuing the IMF.
Yeah, this is when ZANU-PF were celebrating the Herald. Again, it was all over the Herald, ZBC, ZTV, that now, to hell with the West, we have so much billions from China. I did write an article to say, if you look at the promised investments, there were major investments, and for countries like China, these were not investments that will be done overnight or in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. The first sign of those investments would start after 2018. And when Mugabe and ZANU-PF is already gone. But not only that, they failed to understand that China, they are not sympathetic to ZANU-PF. They are very clever investors. They want a return of their money, a return of investment. And they are also advised by the same agents using the perception index. That Zimbabwe is 157 out of 177. They know they are not going to get their money. So it was bilateral on paper, but it was conditional as well. Yes, there was about, I think, was it 20 million, which was going to be delivered in form of rice. And I wrote in that article to say, yes, you get the rice, because, I mean, they are trying to dump produce somewhere. right?
Buy votes with it.
Yeah, but it's and then they still want their 20, and they would have overpriced the rice anyway. So the price, maybe the rice is what about 10 million, and then they'll say, okay, we'll give you 20 million. You give us 20 million, right?
I remember there was another inflated figure concerning, I think, the Kariba Hydro power project, something like that, where the Chinese will give a different figure for Zimbabwe.
Yeah,
but next door in Zambia.
That one has always been a problem, yeah. What normally happens is, yes, government to government, they sign the intention to invest. But then, those are going to invest, those are individual investors.
They do their own homework.
Oh, yes, of course. All they will do is, okay, fine. So all the government will do is to facilitate their nationals to invest in a specific country.
Yeah.
So they will give them information. Because Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF would have given the Chinese government information to say, here is the policies that we have, right? Favorable policies for doing business. And then upon the paperwork that they presented the Chinese government would then sign memorandum of understanding. And then that information is given to their Chinese investors.
It's just a memorandum of understanding.
Yes.
What does that mean?
They actually will go to Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Yeah. To do, a fact-finding mission. And verify the information that they have, whether that is genuinely information coming from the economics, the economists.
So a memorandum of understanding is it's a statement of intent. It's not
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. The government doesn't have money. It's not the government that is going to build the dam to Kariba or the power station.
They go and present it to their own investors, their own business.
Yes. And sometimes government might give guarantees. That's as far as they can do. To say, okay.
Guarantees to say we'll try to talk to our business people to do business.
Now, for example, let's say a Chinese businessman want to invest to a coral mine, for example, and to inject, say, 15 billion US dollars.
Yeah.
The Chinese government might say, will guarantee end loss in the event.
Oh, okay.
In the event that the Zimbabwean government is not sincere about the business and you lose money.
Okay, I see.
So they can do it, they can guarantee their nationals in that. But again, it's not a foregone conclusion because the investors will do their own homework, right? And do a proper project brief and the documentation.
Then they'll say, sorry, but that destination is not safe.
Indeed. So yes, I mean, it's
one thing.
The problem with ZANU-PF is that they were trying to say, to justify that they were right, to say they were going to look east.
But why put big headlines and in capital letters? When it's not guaranteed that it's going to happen.
But ZANU-PF has survived by propaganda since 1980, isn't it? And that is a communist ideology.
Right.
Big Brother is watching you.
Yes. I was thinking also of this, we mentioned that the diaspora remittances amount to even more than half the national budget.
Correct.
Now, that makes the diaspora a very big constituency, even in terms of the economy. Yeah. And if you look at countries like India, countries like, I know Rwanda, when the Rwanda president comes, Kagame, when he comes, he meets the Rwandan people in London.
Yes.
I know that when the Nigerian president, when he comes, to London. He also meets his constituencies. Most of these presidents are doing that. The Indians, they are going back from America. They are going back to India. They are setting up. A lot of these countries, what they are trying to do is to leverage this diaspora capital, yes, and try to use it to develop the countries back home. This is not the case with Zimbabwe, which has, I think, for election purposes, because they don't want the diaspora to get involved in the voting, because they know if they want to strike deals with diaspora people, they are going to demand a vote. Have we not lost an opportunity to use the diaspora to develop the country?
Yeah, as you have summed it up, you find the ZANU-PF government has nothing to do with the sovereign state. What I mean by that is that they don't think about the citizens. They think about power. So they are trying not to involve the diaspora because they think that all people in the diaspora are anti-government. So they are suspicious. And that if they allow you to vote, then you vote them out of power. Regardless of the fact that they've got power, but they can't use the power. This is where the problem is. As you have said, I mean, many countries are benefiting from diaspora citizens. For example, China is what it is because of the diaspora.
Yeah.
Because there was a time whereby in every country there were Chinese going to universities, tertiary education, vocational education, and then they went back. And then they started to develop China, the powerful China that we know.
I understand there are 3 million Chinese now in Africa.
Oh, yes.
If I'm not mistaken.
So, and then I also sometimes attend forums, summits, and conferences where I meet presidents of other countries and then organizations of the diaspora for other countries, ministers, cabinet ministers, etc. Philippines is one other country doing very well through their diaspora. And what they do, they actually developed an interactive map of Philippines, whereby you log in there, you can actually see interactively where opportunities exist for diaspora.
Okay.
So they might say there's a pecan project there, right? And the government will support you.
I think that's something.
There's manufacturing plant that is required there, right? And the diaspora, they are now speaking with one voice. They've got now very powerful economic organizations. So we are not talking about civic organizations. We're talking about serious investment organizations by diaspora.
Okay.
Whereby they actually can build entire towns, put their money together.
I know a project where, for example, I'll give Zimbabwe as an example. For example, Zimbabweans in the diaspora can run a farm which has been put online. So they could put a farm online, and then Zimbabweans from the diaspora would invest their money, and they would everyone would be involved in the decision making. So they would decide whether they want to do piggery there, whether they want to plant potatoes, whether they want to plant tobacco, and then they can employ a farm manager to run the project for them. And
there's a similar project. Sorry. There's a similar project being run by a group of Zambians who are here in the UK. So they approached the government. They said, we have put together our investment portfolio. We want land. We don't want to buy land. we want land.
Yeah.
So that portfolio to
Yeah.
invest. So they were building an estate. Houses, flats, shops, shopping mall.
Shopping mall, yeah.
Schools.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a micro city.
I don't see why, for example, Zimbabweans can't build, say, a hospital or a school as a project or a mall.
They did.
But the people who are there, they are still 19th century mentality.
Yeah. But I think the problem that we have in Zimbabwe is, everything goes back to the government. The government has been surviving on divide and rule. And this is why even within Zimbabwe ourselves, we are not united to face this monster called ZANU-PF.
Yeah, there are some people we don't unite against a common good. Okay. So, for example, because someone supports ZANU-PF, even if ZANU-PF does something wrong, they'll continue to support it.
Oh yeah.
For power political purposes and nothing else.
There are some people who are not even benefiting both socially and economically. But there are some people,
but they throw their weight around.
Yeah. I've been out there meeting people just to solicit, to say, you still believe that ZANU-PF after 36 years can turn around the economy for your own public good?
I don't think they believe, but they know that if you support ZANU-PF, there are chances that you might get freebies, free things, because of your support. I think that's where it is. Most of these youngsters, they don't really support it, but they think ndokuno jiwamari.
But look at it. That's the divide that I was talking about. And all dictators are almost the same. They thrive in poverty. So you make your people poor so that they become reliant on you. But again, I've always, since I think 2000, when I started the active politics, I kept on saying to gatherings, to meetings, that ignorance is not a permanent disability. And one day, Zimbabweans will come to understand. Zimbabweans who have the skills, who have the knowledge, and who have the courage to face the monster and demand what is rightful theirs. And we are there now. We've seen it now, it's no longer just for political parties.
Yeah. I think, citizens are beginning to separate, politics from the necessities of life.
Indeed. Yeah. Before, it was very common that people would be given, just a few beers and they think it's the best government. Especially if you are still youth and you don't have dependents.
Yeah.
But as you grow up, you start a family. The same slogan of giving you beer doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
You need to feed your family. You need to send your children to school. You need to find accommodation for your family. Then better lines will be drawn. To say, hang on. Yesterday you were giving me beer, but I can't give beer to my children. I need a job. So this is where we are now.
What is your final words on the statutory instrument 64 of 2016?
My final advice to the government is that it is an ill-advised gesture. This is not the time to play with the people's lives. If they want really, really to control in terms of controlling goods that are coming in, let them make and introduce policies that are favorable for investment.
Let
them inject investment. let them consolidate in terms of capital infrastructure, improve the infrastructure, attract investment. Only when we reach an optimum position where Zimbabwe can produce its own goods and products, can we then start introducing, and it doesn't have to be wholesomely, introduce certain products to start with, those which maybe do not add much value to people's lives. Luxury goods, for example. People like Shangwa who import $500,000 car. Those are luxury cars. So those should be the first one. Unfortunately, it's not the case, because our politicians, they like to move around with the flashy cars which are most expensive, and they wouldn't want to start with where it has the most. Yes. They are not interested in road, in servicing road infrastructure.
But we have a local Dereck manufacturing. Is it Mazda or something?
They don't manufacture, they just assemble.
Assembly plant, yes.
Yeah. Again, it's running at lower capacity because of capital injection. It's all about money.
So have you got any clue? I meant to ask this. Any clue which industries are still running in Zimbabwe?
I think the only industry that probably is running at capacity is the brewery for beer. Because when people are poor and they are in trouble,
I remember
they wanted to drink.
The breweries has been making a profit, I think.
Indeed, because it's people would want to drink their stresses away. But
and mobile phone companies, because people also want to talk their problems away.
Indeed, yeah.
Spend the day on WhatsApp.
But even mobile phones, it's of late it has been affected, because it all is based on a cash transaction.
I understand they want to get rid of
the absence of cash circulation in the country. It has been affected as well, in a way.
But they are about to kill that industry as well, because I understand that they want to introduce, they want to ban, this way they like banning everything. They want to ban bundles, and people have been using buying bundles to make it easier for them to access WhatsApp.
Not only that, but they are trying to introduce the computer and cyber bill, crime bill.
Yeah.
And what they are going to do is they will try to enforce that from the service suppliers. Not necessarily, so service suppliers will be required to collect information on the usage of phones and that whole thing.
They want to catch cyber terrorists.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, investors don't like that. They want a free market. Again, yes, we've got Econet, which is maybe the biggest service provider in terms of mobile phones. But what is the chance that Econet, if cornered, will still continue to provide that service? They might decide to say, we are pulling out. We can't wait for the government, because the government want service providers like Econet to be policing their clients.
And they might not want to do that.
Oh, yes.
Right, Mr. Pfebve. Thank you very much. I think we've opened up, I think, a few topics which I think we can make more videos on. But I think we've exhausted the statutory instrument. But obviously, if people have questions, they can always put them down in the comment section. Then we can make videos based on those questions. In fact, I think on Sundays we'll try to answer any questions that people might ask. And before we go, can you again tell our listeners how they can get in touch?
Yeah. Our listeners can view my videos on YouTube. They can search Pfebve or they can search Zimbabwe because we do discuss social, economic, and political issues about Zimbabwe. So they can also access on my blog, which is pfebve.blogspot.co.uk. They can also access the videos on Facebook, and they can also follow us on Twitter.
Yeah.
At Pfebve.
Same here. I'm reachable also on derecktafuma.com. That's my website. Also derecktafuma.blogspot.co.uk. That's my other blog. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Just type in my name. It's all in my full name, so very easy to find. Well, thank you very much again, Mr. Elliot Pfebve. I think we will meet again, maybe tomorrow or the day after, to do another video.
Thank you, Mr. Dereck Tafuma.
And thank you, viewers. Thank you for viewing until the end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.